In 1916 in New York, the show Riding Stampede put the Norwegian-American immigrant Tilly Baldwin in the same arena as the male cowboys. The scene showed how rodeo, born from work in the West, was already becoming a spectacle for the city, and how female presence was still an exception at the start of the 20th century, but was gradually gaining visibility. A cowboy from the West holds a .44 caliber Henry rifle, released in the U.S. in 1860, and seen at the time as a big step forward for repeating firearms. The model held 15 cartridges in the tube and was quick to handle, but it was rarely taken on long expeditions to the buffalo hunting plains because of its weight and the cost of ammunition. Vera McGinnis, alongside two cowgirls, shows how since the 1890s ranch fashion spread from Texas to the rodeos of New York and beyond. Hat, boots, and jacket became a practical uniform and a trademark for those who drove cattle, rode in parades, or performed in shows, both in the West and the East of the U.S., giving the equestrian world its look. Around 1912, managers of Crater Lake National Park in Oregon took a small group across the lake in a rowboat. The idea was to capture the unusual blue color of the water and measure the area near Wizard Island, which formed long after the eruption that brought down Mount Mazama 7,700 years ago, and to show that the lake still held signs of the volcano. Around 1900, in the Hopi mesas of northern Arizona, basket making was women's work. They cut yucca, dried the strips, and dyed them with minerals to weave spirals. The baskets were used in corn rituals, paid for marriage alliances, and showed which clan they came from, even then under pressure from missionaries and federal agents. Stephanie Hagenbarth, heir to the ranch that straddles the border between Idaho and Montana, took care of the cattle routine using methods passed down since the late 19th century, when the Hagenbarths settled there and kept ownership, using daily work to hold on to the family's history in the pastures, where each season reminded them who came first. In the final years of the Indian Territory, deputies like Heck Thomas, Bill Tillman, and Chris Madsen hunted fugitives to enforce federal law. One of them was the Cherokee Ned Christie, accused of killing Deputy Dan Maples in 1887. After 5 years in hiding, he was fatally shot when his hideout was taken in November 1892. In 1928, in the open valleys of Wyoming, the Army assigned Lieutenant Jack Colton of the cavalry to lead a small group and re-establish federal authority, holding back the growing conflicts between settlers, traders, and indigenous peoples over control of the region's roots and resources, in a territory the government was still trying to organize. In the spring of 1849, while surveying the dry southern part of the New Mexico Territory, Lieutenant Amiel Weeks Whipple saw a young Yuma woman near the Gila River Trail, staggering and barely breathing. She hadn't eaten or drunk anything for days. He and his men gave her water and took her back to the village where the leaders recognized her family. In 1915, just a few years after cars started entering Yosemite, Mariposa Grove had already become a must-see stop. Naturalists, tourists, and curious visitors went there to see the giant sequoias up close, some thousands of years old, while the country debated how to open the park without destroying what made it unique for the crowds arriving by train and road. In 1906, when Las Vegas was still just a stop in the desert, the Arizona Club became the place where everything happened. People gambled, drank, and found a bed there if they came by train or from the mines. With so few people in town, that's where deals were made. Agreements were whispered and gossip turned into news, day after day, non-stop. In 1911, at the second Pendleton Roundup in Pendleton, Oregon, a group of horsewomen rode into the arena before the events began. Mounted and wearing their work clothes, they greeted the stands and made it clear they were there to compete in the same events as the men, showing the growing presence of women in the early days of rodeo. Son of ranchers in South Dakota, Casey Tibbs left home at 14 to travel the rodeo circuit against his father's wishes. At 19 in 1949, he became a world champion and was featured in Life magazine in 1951. Later, he took his rodeo skills to Hollywood, acting, doing stunt work, and directing Western film scenes during the 1960s and 70s for American cinema. On December 1, 1886, at the small station of Bellevue, Texas, Jim and his brother Rube Burrow stopped the night train, overpowered the engineer and the conductors, and took only a few dollars. Still, that simple heist became the start of a string of robberies that would have sheriffs and Pinkerton agents chasing the brothers for years. In Wyoming, one scene shows Tim McCoy using everything he knew about the Old West. He explains how the Army patrolled the border at the end of the 19th century, describes the indigenous peoples who lived there, and makes it clear he understood the politics of that time, not just the geography. It's obvious he speaks as someone who saw it up close, connecting war, land, and customs. The Wyoming Cowboy went unidentified, but the portrait was later linked to Charles D. Kirkland, a photographer active in Cheyenne, then a major railroad hub. Based on the negative, the scene was likely taken between 1877 and 1895, a time when the West still brought together cattle, railroads, trade, and newcomers looking for opportunity. On December 3, 1880, John H. Kugler, who ran the Las Vegas Gazette in the New Mexico Territory, wrote a long article saying that the Pecos Valley and the Panhandle were full of cattle rustling, stagecoach attacks, and killings, and claimed that the gangs were doing it under the orders of Billy the Kid, seen as a young and dangerous leader. In 1906, at the Turkey Track Ranch in the Texas Panhandle, cowboys and locals got together during a work break to play mumbledy-peg, the pocket knife challenge everyone knew and respected. Every move had its rule, and the game was a way to show who had a steady hand, a sharp eye, and the guts to perform in front of others, with no room for mistakes. At the end of the 19th century, the empire built by the Germans Henry Miller and Charles Lux in California's San Joaquin Valley became a rare case. Starting in 1858, they combined butcher shops, land, and water, and soon controlled more than 1.3 million acres across California, Nevada, and Oregon, all connected to cities through canals, railroads, and meat contracts. At the end of the 19th century, guards working for transport companies in the northwest U.S. still used long rifles with barrels around 30 inches because they offered steadier aim, longer effective range, and softer recoil, even though shorter models were much better for working inside crowded train cars, tight warehouses, and the wooden docks of the time. In 1888, in Pueblo, Colorado, two neighbors captured everyday frontier life. One shows off the newly popular Winchester 1886 lever-action rifle, made for powerful cartridges. The other holds a classic double-barreled gun, common in local hunts, where 10 and 12 gauges were preferred to ensure a clean kill, and smaller ones were used for lighter game. Daughter of Scottish parents and born in New Zealand, Donaldina Cameron arrived in San Francisco in 1895 and soon took charge of the home on Sacramento Street. For decades, she raided tenements and stood up to tongs and corrupt police to rescue Chinese girls from the trafficking fueled by exclusion laws, offering them shelter, education, and stable protection on the West Coast. In Caldwell, Kansas, an unidentified cowboy appears with a pistol in his holster and a rifle in hand, typical of those who drove large herds along the Chisholm Trail. The scene reflects the peak of the rail-linked towns, when cattle from the south arrived in Kansas, fueling all the trade and cementing the state's role as the endpoint of the cattle routes. In 1879, silver entrepreneur Horace Tabor built a 3-story opera house in Leadville in the Rocky Mountains, using bricks hauled from Denver by wagon. The walls, about 16 inches thick, show that the building was made to withstand the cold and serve as a stage for performers traveling through the West during the silver boom. On October 17, 1906, the theater in Deadwood was packed. Gold mine workers, their pockets full thanks to the homestake, bought tickets without asking the price and filled every row. With each scene came loud applause, as if the town in the Black Hills wanted to prove it still had life left, even after the peak of the gold rush. In 1889, in the lively Montmartre district, the Moulin Rouge put on stage dancers who mixed can-can, humor, and toasts to captivate both Parisians and foreigners. With layered skirts and corsets, they set the rhythm of the night and helped turn the cabaret into a postcard symbol of modern Paris and late-century tourism. For a long time, these trees survived drought, pests, landslides, and floods. They stood tall like so many forests in the West that John Muir fought to protect in the 19th century. But what nature spared, human haste ended up taking, showing that preserving takes more work than destroying. And even today, his warning still echoes, especially when profit calls the shots. On July 19, 1878, Sam Bass arrived in Round Rock to rob the local bank, unaware that an informant had tipped off Major John B. Jones and the Texas Rangers. When the group showed up on Main Street, gunfire broke out. Bass was shot and wounded, and the teenager Jefferson Soapy Smith, 17 years old, witnessed everything and later told the story to curious locals. When Teddy Blue Abbott got to Miles City in the 1880s, the town was the heart of the cattle business on the northern plains. He said cowboys spent their pay fast. After that, there was no question. They'd saddle up, hit the trail back to the ranch, and wait for the next herd. That's how the town kept going, with people constantly riding in and out.